A big part of the Gene Keys is about working with the shadow. And today I want to give you examples of how I do that. So I'm going to go through my Gene Keys and give you real life examples of how I have been able to transmute the shadow into the gift. Before I do that, though, I just want to give a couple reminders around shadow work. First, remember that everyone has shadow. And the reason for that is that everyone is born into the world with a sacred wound, with this sense of separateness that we're missing something. And we seek and search our whole lives to try and find that unity. But in the earlier parts of our life, we have to stumble, we have to fall, we have to develop patterns and ways of seeing the world that help us in that moment and that protect us. But oftentimes those same systems turn into a limitation because we don't learn, we don't adapt, we don't grow. And then we have a conditioned response, a response that makes us feel like a victim, that something happened to me instead of something happening for me. And this work requires gentleness, and it requires a compassionate and loving heart with yourself, because some of these patterns are hard to see and witness in your life. And you'll remain blind to them until you develop the kindness and love for yourself that allows you to work with it. Our unconscious is constantly protecting us. And so we've got to reassure it and let it know that everything is going to be okay as we work through this process. Keeping in mind that shadow work is equal parts evolution and involution. Meaning, yes, you need to work your side. You need to do your part and try to stay connected to that inner self, that true you, the thing at the core of all of us. Forgive the plane going overhead here. I figured while I was talking about shadow work, what a beautiful sunset that's casting these big, long shadows all over the roof next door and in the backyard. I lost my train of thought, but it doesn't matter. Let's get started here. So my first shadow that I want to talk about is the shadow of failure. And what comes from the shadow of failure, man, I should have brought the green out here, is the gift of preservation. I'm going to run out of room. That's preservation. So, an example from my life. Well, the one that comes to my mind first and foremost is my business, my last business. It started to fall apart because I was half-hearted, which is another one of my shadows that we'll get to. I wasn't all the way in. I, at the time, thought that I was. I really thought that I was doing everything and anything that I could to avoid a failure. What I realized, though, is that I wasn't marching towards what I wanted. What I was doing was trying to avoid things falling apart. And I was trying to prove to the world that I wasn't a failure. And the Gene Keys helped me to see that. And it helped me to realize that, okay, I can use that same energy, the energy that goes into avoiding failure, and I can put it into preserving something, deciding that something is important and marching towards it instead of running away from a failure. And so that's what I'm doing right now. As I'm sitting here talking to you, I decided that this is the message that I want to share with the world right now. The next one is expectation, which turns into detachment. And this is my evolution. So I see this everywhere in my life. Remember, your evolution is the thing that's going to keep showing up over and over again so that you can learn lessons, so that your soul can walk its dharma. So what comes to mind with expectation? I'm going to use I'm shooting from the hip with all of these. This is not pre-planned. I'm going to use the example of this YouTube channel right now. I catch myself constantly slipping into this shadow of expectation. Ooh, if I do this, I'm going to get this many people to subscribe to the channel. Or if I do this, then I have a chance of this many people coming to the wisdom call. Or, you know, I'm going to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year, or, you know, you name it. And what life teaches me time and time again is that those all are coming from my ego. What comes from my causal body, my higher self, is just engaging with the present moment right now, doing the best that I can in this moment and detaching from all of those outcomes. That's why my videos have been kind of all over the place lately. Like, I'm just being myself. I'm trying to be me instead of trying to fit into an algorithm. And that comes from this feeling of detachment, of being able to just trust that the people that are supposed to see this are going to see it. And the next steps are going to make themselves clear when the next steps need to make themselves clear. Next one is distraction is the shadow, and enrichment is the gain. And I actually have this one ×2 in my profile, which is a really common question. What do you do if there's 2 or 3 of a certain gene key in your profile? And I heard Richard talk about that once, and his answer was just contemplate it more. You know, it's a bigger part of the codes that unlock your higher purpose and prosperity in your life. So just spend some extra time with them. And if you find a deeper meaning, then listen to your intuition, because you're probably right. Windy out here. These wheels have a lock. Let me see if I can. There we go. I think that fixed it. All right. So distraction. Okay. I am constantly catching myself in needing to draw myself away from presence because I feel uncomfortable. And that discomfort, I've come to realize through the gene keys, is the core wound, the sense of separateness. Interestingly, though, that sense of separateness is what drives me. Now that I know that, I can make a choice to do something that serves my soul, do something that makes me feel better. So an example of this is in the evenings, often I feel, my goodness, I feel tired. And I tell myself the story that I need to just turn on the TV. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's times that TV enriches my soul. So that's not what I'm saying. But there are other times that I am just distracting myself away from thinking about something that I don't want to think about. Where instead, I'm starting to develop another set of practices that I know actually enrich my soul. So for example, instead of watching TV and just numbing out, I can journal about that thing, or I can read something that taps me into that higher part of myself. And that's just a really mundane day-to-day example, but this also shows up in massive ways in the collective for me with social media, for example, YouTube even, where I just have this core knowing, which this is also my core wound in addition to my radiance, that people need to turn inwards, myself included. And I'm worried sometimes that these platforms that I'm contributing to are contributing to this distraction. All right, moving on now, we've got limitation and realism. My purpose. And the first thing that comes to mind here is setting up my last business, dealing with the limitation of the government, the red tape around everything, needing to get a business license through the city, needing to get a certificate with the state, needing to get insurance, needing to jump through that hoop, do this thing with the fire department, this other thing. Like, there is so much red tape in the world. And at the same time, the gift of realism helps me to work with that red tape, to bring the things, to manifest the things in this reality that I want to bring into the world. Because the reality of the situation is that there is red tape. And so I can choose to see that as a limitation, or I can choose to see that as a step on the path to opening my business. And that's what I did. I'll leave that one there. Quick, down and dirty. No need to keep going. Next up, we've got the shadow of half-heartedness. And the gift of commitment. So I had a talk with myself right before I came out here to shoot this video about this exact thing. I wasn't positive that I wanted to shoot this video right now. I normally shoot in the morning if I'm recording a video, and it is like 7:30 in the evening right now. I haven't had dinner yet. And so as I was setting up, I had this part of me that was uncertain that I wanted to be doing this. And in that moment, I paused. And that is a huge part of dealing with shadow work. You have to take a pause. That allows a pivot to happen. And if you've never heard that trinity, it's pause, pivot, and merge. That is the kind of the pattern of contemplation. Pause, we create space. Pivot, a new energy or a new way of approaching an energy appears. And then merge, given a long enough period of time, that choice point just becomes part of us, becomes natural. Anyway, so I paused and I sat down, and I, in that moment, said, if you're doing this, commit to doing it. You are here to be of service. This is the path that you have chosen to walk. Show up, or don't, right? Make a commitment to not showing up. That's okay too. However, I knew that I wanted to do this. It's beautiful outside. I had the idea pop into my brain during tea with Richard today. Like, it was perfect. So here we are. Next up, we've got seriousness, which transforms into delight. Okay, so this is my IQ. And so that's a mental pattern, right? A mental shutting down for me. And this, what's popping up right now is my childhood for this one, interestingly. So because of the circumstances, or some of the circumstances that I grew up in, I needed to grow up really fast. And that made me a very serious person. It took away the delightful innocence that I had. Trying to think of a specific example. So, for example, if I were playing baseball, which was my sport growing up, I oftentimes would fall into seriousness with it. So instead of playing for the love of the game, man, it's getting windy out here. Instead of playing for the love of the game, the delight, I would get out there and drill for hours and bust my butt and not have any fun doing it. That's how this shadow shows up for me. It's like I get really graspy and really tight and try and take over from the universe, and that never goes well. Another example that's popping into my brain is like when I'm writing, which I do often. I don't share my writing anywhere, but I write a lot. And when I get stuck, it's because I'm so up here in my head and I'm so grappling with the words. Versus when I'm in delight, it just spills out of me. I'm just having fun. It's like being in flow. Next up, we've got conflict to diplomacy. How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So conflict, the best place that I can think about that is, again, at my last business, and I had like generally about 15 employees on staff, and managing that many people, leading that many people, having meetings with that many people, and that many different personalities and views of the world inevitably got me and other people into conflict. And how that shows up is me trying to protect myself at all costs. So for example, I had this idea to launch a new service at the business. And I brought it to everyone else and I opened the floor and said, what do you guys think? And what I wanted was everyone to say, great job, that's awesome. And what happened was people had concerns and people had questions. And I immediately went into conflict. I immediately like sucked inside of myself and shut down and started defending myself and started digging in and started needing to get my opinion across and made sure they saw things my way. Versus diplomacy at another meeting, for example, what this gift gives me the ability to do is really feel into the energy of everyone that's in the room and really decide what is the best path or course of action for what's about to happen, especially when I'm the one in the quote unquote leadership seat. And so an example here is like, I sometimes would start a meeting with a meditation or with breath work or with something that was going to kind of regulate everybody. And then we would share what are called bright spots. They're like cool things that happened in that person's day or week or whatever. And that led to a much cleaner communication. People are in gratitude. People are open. They're willing to hear. Next one, we're going to do hunger and adventure. So this is my SQ, and it ties to, for me, a lot to my addiction and my addictive behaviors. So if you ever heard the term hungry ghosts, that really ties into this for me. There is just this deep hole that is inside of me that up until recently, a year or so, I tried to fill with anything and everything external to me. And my favorite way of doing that was with substances. So I just had this hunger to be full. I had this hunger to feel something different, or for a long time to feel something. And that energy just drives me to do things that I don't want to do. And yet when I'm in the shadow, it feels almost like I don't have control over it. Versus choosing the adventure. So when I stopped using, I decided to join the Marine Corps. And that, at the time, looking back, I see now that was still an external means of trying to transform or transmute this energy. But in the moment, it worked. And it's the example that popped into my brain of transmuting that hunger into turning my life into an adventure. Now, I try to fill that hunger with God. I try to remember that it is a part of the human condition. I give myself grace. At least I try to. That feels about good lengthwise for tonight. The sun is down. I want to invite you to the wisdom call. These are calls that right now I'm doing every couple of weeks where you can come and ask questions, say hi, Let's figure out together how we can shift things in your internal and your external world. This is between these videos that I do that I hope are valuable to you and those calls where you can come and ask all of your questions. I'm hopeful that this is as good as any course that's out there. Like I want to help. And my way of helping, or the way that I see this working out, is there's going to be a ton of free stuff that I continue to do. And then there's going to be paid full price engagements that allow me to go really deep with people and give me the freedom to do this stuff for everyone that can't or doesn't want to do that paid engagement. And that feels good to me right now. So thank you guys for being here. Till next time.